Hi, everybody. This is Christopher Allen, and I am joined again by Clark Aldrich, and we're going to talk a little bit today about short sims. We had an opportunity to speak a couple months ago when your book came out on short sims, and I thought, there's a number of things that we didn't get an opportunity to talk about in that live stream, and I was hoping to get some updates. So Clark, thanks again for joining me. And if you don't mind, let's kind of jump right into a few questions. Is that
Great.
okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, for sure. Okay. So I'm interested in, what sparked your curiosity and what got you started with digital learning.
I really believe the whole world needs to learn a lot more. I think we're, education is a major issue for the entire world, and I would love to figure out.
Oh, shoot. Well, we'll give Clark here a minute or two to see if his bandwidth won't come back, and we'll give it another shot. So a number of things while we're waiting for Clark to reconnect here. Oh, there he is.
Okay, sorry about that.
Hey, no problem.
Whole world needs education, and certainly e-learning and online learning. And obviously, I was interested before it was called that. Gave me a way to figure out how to impact the world. And so I think it's incredible. And we're still there. I mean, all of us who are listening to this, every single person who is interested in this area has the chance to change the world in a way that few others do. And so it's, we're all in an incredibly exciting position where we figure out a few things and suddenly the world changes, bang, like that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are starting to be forced into studying about this topic a lot more heavily, whether it's the K through 12 situation that they might be in and looking at a blended learning approach where some days they're going to be in the classroom and other days they're going to be working from home.
And there's good and bad there. I mean, part of the problem is that when we're sort of shoved into this new area, if we're shoved into online learning kind of without our excitement and interest, then we typically take a low denominator approach. We sort of like, let's just panic and get done what we can possibly get done. And my area is a little more, hopefully a little more is like once you try that and you like parts of it but don't like other parts of it, then you want to move on to something a little better. And so I think what I'm focusing on, hopefully with the short sim framework, is take the initial excitement about e-learning, and then see what we're actually producing, get a little unhappy, and then do something a little better. And so I think that's the opportunity. The frustration right now, again, is sort of this first generation exposure to e-learning done very reluctantly.
Yeah. So the next question was the perfect follow-on here. Maybe there's two parts to this question, I guess. And the first part is, can you define e-learning a little bit about, kind of what does the industry generally mean when they're saying e-learning? And then talk a little bit about, what are some of the weaknesses that you see in the typical e-learning experiences that are being produced?
Sure. So regarding learning, there's a way of structuring content to make other people learn from it. So, if you have to defuse a nuclear bomb, there's a way that I can give you information so that you can learn how to do that. If you want to learn how to trade stocks, if you want to learn how to be a leader, if you want all these things, there's lots of different ways that you can learn, but one way is to access content that's structured in a way that's designed to help you learn. Now, you could also do, hang around with a role model and watch how she is a leader, or you can, whatever. So lots of ways of learning, but in terms of specifically, can we structure content to make it help you in that process? Can we deliver content to you that makes you learn better, faster, more predictably? So once you have that, then there's sort of there's two ways of thinking about it now. One of them is a live synchronous version like we're seeing right now where, we're talking.
Mm-hmm.
And another one is saying, can we have basically pre-canned content? Can we have content you can access whenever you want to at your time? So let's call the first one synchronous and the second one asynchronous. So my obsession has always been on the asynchronous side. It's like, how can we create content that is basically infinitely scalable?
Well, maybe not the best internet connection of the week, but we'll give Clark here another second to jump back in and take a look at a few short sims. Kind of while he's doing that.
Oh, sorry. How can we create content that's high quality, but that's self-paced? And I ultimately believe the self-paced is going to be the pharmaceuticals and the sorry, I'm back.
Yeah.
And the synchronous is going to be the doctors. So I think we're going into a doctor pharmaceutical model, and the scalable stuff is the pharmaceuticals, and the one-to-one or the live stuff is going to be the doctors. And I think getting that combination right is going to be infinitely powerful. Now, having said that, the quality, the basic framework of most e-learning, especially the self-paced stuff, in my opinion, stinks. I hate most e-learning content. It's borrowed far too much from a PowerPoint presentation framework. It borrows far too much from a workbook thing. And these are all things that we hate doing. I mean, we hate PowerPoint presentations. They're painful. I mean,
yeah,
most people can listen to PowerPoint presentation for about 12 minutes before they want to leave. And most people can do a few pages of a workbook before they really, really don't want to do anymore. And so the framework of most e-learning content, I mean, I remember when I was at Gartner Group and I saw my first, when someone said, hey, there's going to be, we have this online content stuff, or there's CD-ROM based content. Do you want to see it? I'm like, oh yes, it's going to be really great. I grew up on computer games. I've done a lot of experiential learning through summer camps and stuff as a counselor. I was so excited to see my first example of online learning, and I saw it, and it was just like, sad trombone sound. And so, that was whatever, 98, 99, whatever. And ever since then, it was just like, well, how can we make content that actually doesn't suck? How can we make content that people want to do? And the other real tragedy is a lot of the content that we have produced, no one's happy with it. Obviously the users aren't happy with it because it's boring and tedious. And again, it has the same problem of caching content. You get content and you can't use it, therefore you backlog it, and therefore you have a cache that gets overflowed, and then you become miserable. And most people's cache is about 12 minutes. The other side of it is the sponsors aren't very happy either. The people who paid for it because it doesn't work. It actually doesn't translate. And this is true of almost all training, and frankly, a lot of education too, is it doesn't translate to the real world very nicely. What you learn in a classroom is how to be a person in the classroom. Mm-hmm. If you ever want to learn how to be a person in a classroom, go to a classroom experience, and you will learn that experience. So we have a giant problem that what we're doing is not making anyone happy, and that's why kind of our industry, the training industry, and frankly, K through 12 and higher ed as well, hit a lot of PR bumps. I mean, ironically, the killer app of K through 12 is daycare, and that's been taken away. So it's they're really unhappy with that. So I wrote a book called Unschooling Rules, which sort of looked at deconstructing what we think of as education, and basically saying that we've made a lot of bad choices. So other than that, I think it's great.
Well, I think you hit on 2 points that really resonate with me, and one is too much emphasis on content and not enough emphasis on the structure for how people learn. And so when I often look at typical e-learning examples, I see a lot of presentation-based content, exactly what you're saying, where it's regurgitation of PowerPoint that you can take on your own without the sage on the stage being there. But there isn't a whole lot of thought that goes into really how do we structure these experiences so someone can learn from them, which is, to be quite frank, why I'm so excited about your approach with short sims, because it's the experience and the performance that really shines. And
let me interrupt you 1 second before we get to what I hope is an answer. One more problem, if I will, because it's fun to complain. And so I'm going to complain about our current options, which is on one hand, we can create we can create linear content, the PowerPoint style structure, whatever. And the problem is that we've given a tremendous amount of thought to how do we get around the fact that content is linear. And so given that the content is going to be linear, we've been incredibly clever in a useless sort of way at coming up with a lot of different ways of video, graphics, and animation. And we've done so much work to try to overcompensate for the fact that stuff doesn't fundamentally work. It's a bad model. So I think we've incredibly optimized all the sparkles and doodads and stuff around linear content. At the same time, whenever we look at new things like augmented reality, for example, or virtual reality, or Second Life way back when, or whatever, we then go the other direction of saying, oh, the toolkit will solve all our problems. If we do something in virtual reality, therefore it will be good because virtual reality in theory should be good. And so we have like no pedagogy at all.
Right.
We have no way of rigorously thinking about content, experiential content. When we started getting excited about augmented reality, virtual reality, all these things, we don't really know how to do it. And so there's the assumption of if we're going to do something new, then the toolkit itself, the environment itself, will take care of the learning because it is inherently a learning environment. Computer games, same thing. And obviously, huge, sad trombone sound there too. So we have these two extremes of incredible rigorous pedagogy around a bad model, which is linear, and then we have overexcitement around new technologies that are immersive inherently or experiential inherently, but we don't think about the pedagogy or the cost that goes into those, and so both of those paths are failures. Okay, now short sims.
Yeah. No short sims. All right, so I'm gonna add to our view here a video example from your site, shortsims.com, and maybe I'll pull this banner down so we get a better view. You've got 6+ examples here on your site where people can not only get a video walkthrough, but they can also go through and play some of these yourself. I've picked one here on ransomware. Why don't I hit play and you can talk a little bit about the design? Is that all right?
Absolutely.
All right, here we go.
So here's a sim on ransomware. By the way, the sim is free, so if you want to bring this into your own organization, it starts off with a setup, which is ransomware is bad. Let me tell you a tiny bit about ransomware. Here's what happens. So it's giving a little bit of warning beforehand. It's perhaps a little more linear content than I usually like to, but I think it is useful anyway to set the stage. Graphics are hopefully cheerful and happy. We're talking about ransomware, but we're doing it in a cheerful and happy way. And now we're going to show you through some real world situations. You get a SharePoint link. Are you going to be suspicious or not? Fundamental link, suspicious or not. Every time you get a new piece of communication, are you suspicious or not? So we're reinforcing this key decision around every time you get a new thing. You go online, you're asked to download a link. Should you be suspicious or not? So reinforcing that part of it. Now we're giving you a bunch of reasons. If you want to say, yes, I am suspicious, give you a bunch of reasons as to why. Once again, we're reinforcing all of these bad things. So it's a nice sort of first person perspective. Right here, we're now going a little different direction, which is we're showing you, what happens when a computer is being attacked, and what do you do in terms of, do you disconnect the power first, or do you cancel? So it's a little bit of very helpful advice in terms of if you're suddenly seeing all these windows pop up on your screen, or you hear your fan overgoing or something. So that's nice. Now, what we're going to do right here, after we give a couple of examples of situations that should make you think of it, is now we're going to put you in the position of being the bad guy, which is a lot of fun with ransomware, and we're doing that. We're doing that optionally. You don't have to do this, and I love giving people options. If you want to, you can be the bad guy. Do you want to use brute force? Do you want to use phishing, or do you want to do whale phishing as an version? What's the difference between them? So now I want to learn a little bit about the difference between broad email attacks and phishing attacks, where I use a little bit of personal information. Now a second question. We want to get people to motivate you. Do we use fear? Do we use greed? Are we going to say if you don't do this, you're in trouble, or if you do this, you'll get some great opportunity? Now we're going to say, okay, now we're going to download. Now we're going to download programs from our Word document. Do you want to do one, or do you want to do multiple ones? There's different risks associated with that, but also again gets you realize that if you're opening up a bad document, there may be multiple malwares associated with it. Do you want it to spread? Do you want it to stay local? It gets more likely to get caught if you spread. So once again, you're learning all about ransomware, but you're learning about it not as a victim, but as sort of the bad guy. Do you want to copy it? Do you want to encrypt the pictures or the file as well? When do you want to do it? All these questions are interesting around. So it's a much more fun way of learning about ransomware, making a bunch of really interesting choices that also make you a lot more capable of recognizing it in the real world.
Yeah, there's a number of things that I think are really attractive, at least for me, when I'm looking at this example right away. Is I'm in control as the student, and I'm making decisions. And often when I look at other typical e-learning approaches where it's content heavy first, you're asking me to read and be excited about reading whatever that material is far before I'm hooked, right? if this was a movie or a TV show and I had to get all of that backstory before there was something that intrigued me, that pulled me in as a viewer, why I'd click and I'd move on to, you know, flip the something else. Right. And so the student is very active and they're engaged. And in this example, as you're pulling people through the variety of ways in which you can engage them, you know, whether recognizing a particular attack and identifying why you think that happens to be the case, you're thinking and you're active. And just as in the same way as when you get the opportunity to play the bad guy, now you can start getting to understand the plan of attack and why you're getting these things and what the bad guy is hoping to get out of it. And it seems far more engaging to me than a lot of the presentation style applications.
Yeah, it's fun, and it maps to the real world. So again, the beginning and the end of the sim maps to the real world in terms of, you know, you get a piece of communication, should you be suspicious or not. The fundamental decision every time we get anything is, should we be suspicious or not. So it maps, so it drives real world behavior in part because it maps nicely to the real world. The other thing about this is, you know, the graphics are very helpful in my opinion. I think they are, but they're also very simple, and so it's, you know, literally, and we'll go over this in the class, in the short sims class, but all of these graphics were basically, you know, this clip art that was colored and then mocked up in PowerPoint and then exported to this program. So it's incredibly, you know, the as long as you're a little clever, I mean, it's much more important to be kind of sneaky and devious and perhaps empathetic than it is to be technically competent. So, you know, I'm not an artist by any means at all, and yet I have to deliver finished short sims every day. And so the way I do that is to, you know, use clip art very, very cleverly. And again, if we start thinking about it, we think about it as, you know, as we do builds, for example. Builds are a very useful technique to show progress in motion. But also in some cases, you know, they're much more computer game-like or something, and you're moving around a virtual world. So it's a nice example of a bunch of things like that. The other thing is you know, except for where you stop the screen, the words are pretty minimum. So you know, it's one thing that people get wrong when doing short sims, and we'll certainly spend a lot of time in the class going over what people do wrong as much as what people do right. And a lot of people overscript them. There's many too many words and far too few actions. And so what if you can reverse that? What if you have most of the activity be the actions, the clicking, the moving through things quickly, rather than giving people 2 paragraphs to read, which again, we all hate to do.
I think we covered a little bit of this in the example, but when you're thinking about really designing a short sim, or think this might be the right modality, can you talk a little bit about the learning paradigm that you're thinking about when you're looking at content, and coming from the perspective of I'm seeing something in this performance. I'm seeing something in the content here that really screams that we ought to be using short sim methodology.
So I'm biased here, so I apologize for that. My opinion is that we are getting to a point where we default to short sims, and we need to justify why we're not doing a short sim. So, you know, it's like, you know, of course, and working backwards from that erroneous statement, perhaps, or way too premature statement is, you know, I used to say about simulations, use simulations when you want people to use the information in the real world, and if you don't, then don't worry about it. Mm-hmm. And so to some degree, wherever there's an overlap between I need to learn some content and then I need to change my behavior appropriately, short sims are great because they're focusing on that. Now, in some cases, you know, it can be learning how to do something or learning how to apply an algorithm. Another example from that page is, you know, how to learn about the demand curve. And so obviously most of us are not applying the demand curve. It's an intellectual exercise to learn Adam Smith Econ 101 economics, but, you know, it's still, so short sims work well even when you don't need to actually apply something in the real world, when you want to understand something by futzing around with it. But mostly, you know, if there's a change in behavior, then short sims are a very, very good thing. You know, ransomware, there's a change in behavior. Mm-hmm. COVID-19, people returning to the workforce, and they need to behave differently because it's COVID. You know, there's COVID around. How do you behave differently? So I think it's a really nice, wherever there's behavior associated with it, short sims are a really, really good fit. And then, by the way, most of the places where there's not behavior, short sims are still a good fit.
Yeah, and that's really because the distance between the student doing something and the new behavior is almost zero, right?
Yeah, and there's some people who've taken the class and literally have said, I've made a couple of short sims since the class, and thank you. But literally, the perspective of creating a short sim has influenced everything I've done. And so I've had people who have gone through the class who've given me the feedback of saying, not only am I really happy making some short sims, but I also basically realized why all my old content didn't work. I realized why my old traditional content failed. It's because it did not take into account how people are applying it in the real world and what that's like. I was far too, one person used the word smug. I was far too smug in terms of saying, here's some high level concepts, figure out how to apply it in the real world. And oh yeah, by the way, that didn't work. So there's a discipline to doing it that I think is actually helpful. I mean, every single person who's involved in the education industry should know how to make short sims, not always because they're going to, although they will, but because it's a perspective of action focus that is really wonderful. And what are the consequences of doing the right thing? What are the consequences of doing the wrong thing? What does right and wrong even feel like? And again, most people fear that initially, but then they get to it. One more part of that, and again, in the workshops, we go through a lot of, good practices, but also a lot of bad practices, a lot of, here's what to avoid.
Yeah.
One more thing, again, of the things to avoid, most people who start off making a short sim or a simulation, a branching story, go way too complicated in terms of narrative structure, create multiple parallel it's like a be your own choose your own adventure game, and like, let's have 6 different paths down which they can go depending on choices they make, and they go crazy and they make one maybe and they show it to a bunch of people and no one likes taking it, and they walk away and they never do it again because it's a miserable experience. That's the wrong way of doing it. The right way of doing it is starting off with the primary question, and again, we go through all this in the class in a lot more detail, but the primary question when you interview your subject matter expert is, what are common mistakes made in this area? And then use those and work backwards from those and saying, how can I present those common mistakes in a way that lines up with the real world so that we can identify wrong behaviors and correct them. And then along the way, we're really, really clever. And again, if you have 10 pounds of smart, then put 9 pounds of it into your setting up a good situation for people, an interesting context, and then giving them interesting decisions. And if you're smart and clever about that, then you will create a good short sim, which is really important, but even more importantly, that's valuable, that does change behavior, but also that's relatively simple to make. And that's the other thing. It doesn't do you in the world, it doesn't do you any good at all if you can take 6 months to build a great sim. It doesn't even do you any good to make 2 months. What if you could make one sim every, it takes about 40 hours to make a good sim for people who are experienced at it. And they tend to do that about every week and a half. And so it's this notion of speed and momentum and excitement, and let's just keep the ball rolling rather than, I'll get back to you in 2 months with a prototype kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think that, aligns with the definite needs of the market. There are a lot of industry professionals who are tasked with creating learning product, and the timelines are always short. And so, one of the things that I think is really appealing is if you can, especially about short sims here, is if you can create an engaging experience that's usable, within, as a single person, going through and building this material in a week or a week and a half, and have it out there tested and played with, and maybe even delivered to a broad swath of people, that's appealing.
Yeah, and once you get speed, once speed becomes a competitive weapon of your training organization or of your customers, then your world changes. I mean, the CLO of an organization is invited to the big table with the CEO around crises if they can produce training in a week rather than 2 months. Every single CLO I know is buried in backlog. They say I get complaints all the time from my people saying, I need this tomorrow. I need this, I need this next week. I need content fast. And most CLOs are buried behind months and months of backlog. They can't stand it. They're always playing defense. They're always apologizing. And people are, in some cases, where it's fine, I'm going to go hire my own people, or I'm going to go outside of our organization because you can't keep up with me. So the CLO is always playing defense in the old model. And the other, so once you start producing short sims, once you start producing them quickly, again, then you don't have to make everyone perfect. You don't need to worry about scope creep. Almost every short sim doesn't do everything we want it to do, but we get it out the door. It does some things well, and then we suddenly realize, oh wait, there's another opportunity for a second short sim, and now let's do that one. And so it's this notion of sort of the what's on the margin, and the margin in the Econ 101 sense, to go back to that, of what is the next most important topic? Is it leadership in a difficult situation? Great, let's do it. Is it malware? Great, let's do it. Is it doing virtual sales calls? Great, let's do it. But let's constantly chew on the next big thing. Do a good enough sim, get it out the door. Let's not get buried by scope creep. And then where it's not, where we still have a hole, let's make another one and then another one. And so it's a whole different mentality.
Last question I've got queued up for our conversation today, I think really rolls into what you were just talking about. And I think there's really broad applicability for the use of short sims. But there's going to be certainly some dissonance about removing some of the tried and true comfortable things that an organization has done from an instructional approach perspective. Where do you think they really fit, and how hard would you argue that they should be a majority component of a curriculum and modality mix for an organization?
It's not my argument they should be a majority. They will be, I believe, but it's not my argument for anyone. So what you do, if you're a CLO, if you're a training organization, or if you're a vendor who's providing educational content to a bunch of different organizations, you don't need to bet the farm. You need to bet a pig. You don't need to go all in. This is not something that can be transformational, but it's also something where you can start small. Build one short sim. I have 2 short sims right now, one on ransomware, one on returning to the workplace, that are free. Grab it, throw it into your organization, see how they react to it. Get them, find a few people in your organization and get them skilled on the methodology. Take the class, great class. Go through that and just start building them. And anyone, you do have to say, I want to, if I'm going to develop someone internally to do this stuff, you do have to give them 2 or 3 to get the hang of it. It's not just a matter of 1. So give them the runway to do that. Start building 1, then 2, then 3 short sims. By the 3rd one, it'll be really good. And then start figuring out what content you can, finding new things for that person to do. And I almost guarantee, as long as you're producing 1 or 2 or 3 is the hard part. Once you get past that point, now it's just like, great, what else? Now let's just do more and more. And I think it snowballs after that point, where it just becomes something that makes sense for things. You also see problems differently. And someone comes to you and says, oh my God, I need this solved. You as a CLO, or you as the client ombudsman, is going to say, boom, what's going to work with that? Sure, sim. Here, try, And so it's going to take off on itself, as long as you kind of get the ball rolling and get past your own internal tipping point, which is basically producing 2 or 3 short sims yourself, and then it's downhill from there. So it's not a matter of saying, oh, trust me, go big. Don't do that at all. Don't trust me at all. Go small, but definitely go.
Yeah. So Thanks for joining me here today. This was a good conversation. I'm glad we got into some of these items in depth. You're running another workshop with us through the Allen Academy, specifically on short sims. You want to give just a little bit of a flavor of what a participant might expect when they're signing up to work with you?
Class, people have been really, really happy. I get happy emails all the time from people saying it was really a turning point in their career. It's really something that made them think through the world differently. We do 5 classes, and what we do is we walk through the process of creating a short sim. Everyone creates their own short sim, which is a lot of fun. And we go through the steps. We show all the problems to avoid, which saves everyone a lot of sanity. And there's so many little things where, even the way you put together your sim from behind, where no one can see, the way you organize your sim makes all the difference in the world between a fun, easy process to unending misery. And so you really do want to get a little bit of skills under your belt to move ahead. If you just give someone the tool and say, go for it, I guarantee you're going to burn out very quickly. So all those kinds of little things that make your life easy. is good. And then so we go through the class, and the fun thing is, again, we do everything from pick your topic, to do the interviews, to start thinking of your setting, to thinking of the interface, to looking at the rough draft, to getting feedback from other people, to make all those things we do. And there's a camaraderie there. I mean, we see each other's work. Another thing people tell me is saying, Clark, you're fine, but what was really fun was seeing other people going through the same things I was going through and making their own discoveries and sharing it. So I think there's a camaraderie that I think is way more important than what I can do or say, in terms of let's go through the process together. And then between sessions 4 and 5, we do one-on-ones, and I spend one-on-one time with every participant. And I'll go and I'll look at their sim and we'll talk about it, and I'll give a bunch of suggestions. Some of them may be good. Some of them definitely won't be good. But even taking over their screen and moving things around a little bit and say, have you thought about this or something? And so that's sort of a nice point where you go from there's this really magic moment in a short sim when you go from basically a pile of notes and faith and hope to suddenly seeing it happen. And it really is magical. Every time I've made hundreds, if not more, short sims, every single time there's a magic when you go from a pile of notes and a couple of sketches to suddenly seeing it look right. And it's a wonderful moment. And so for me, it's fun to be there when people, when that transition happens from I'm not sure to oh wow, yeah, and they want to show other people and stuff. And so it's that moment around between classes 4 and 5, and then 5 is just sort of we all show each other our finished sims, and we talk through the future of the implications and stuff. So it's more of a workshop than a traditional class. It's very much learning by doing, and I think it's we'll have a lot of fun.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again for joining me this afternoon for the live stream. This has been valuable information. I invite everybody to take a look at Clark's work on shortsims.com, and of course pick up his book. There's tons of examples again that are playable, and I appreciate all the work that you're doing, and look forward to spending more time learning about short sims and making a few myself here as we're rolling through the end of the summer.
Definitely, and the wind behind me is whipping up. I'm in the middle of a storm here in Connecticut, so the power did not go out, so I'm very excited, and I'm sorry I lost a few moments of connectivity, but yay. Christopher, thank you. It's always a pleasure, and Allen Academy is great, and it's been seeing how well they've worked with me to make the best possible course. I can only say, this is a rigorous program, and I would not only look at short sims, I would look at all of the Acting Academy curriculum. These are really, really high quality content with all a focus on the stuff that makes learning professionals fun and powerful and effective. And I do think the opportunity is to change the organization from being one that's only doing pretty well to doing great, to being world class. And so I think the whole Allen Academy curricula, which hopefully Short Sims holds its own, is towards world class transformation. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Valuable for sure. Thanks so much for that endorsement, Clark, and we'll talk to you soon.
Good, thanks. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it.